welcome back to another video. I'm Vanessa. If you're new here, I talk about books, movies, and all things storytelling related here on my channel. And today we're going to be talking about the movie Heretic. And I've got a special guest with me today. You guys might have seen her in our last video when we talked about sinners. But Steph, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Steph. I tend to go by Contraddiction with 2 Ds on social media. I am a token ex-Mormon in the community, and I'm also a horror geek. And so this movie kind of marries two of my little corners of the world. So I am really excited to kind of go over all the little details that if you're a Mormon, you know, and you either hate it because you're a true believing Mormon, or you are excited and laughing your heads off or crying at the same time, like I did.
Yeah, so Steph and I talked a little bit about Heretic since, we both come from deconstructing religion spaces, and Steph being ex-Mormon. I'm ex-Christian but not Mormon, and so obviously Steph is going to be able to see and give us some insights into the movie that I probably haven't picked up on because I'm not Mormon. But I'm excited for this discussion. So I guess we can start off with, and for anyone watching the live or the replay later on, leave a comment down below and let us know if you've seen Heretic, your thoughts on it. We will be getting into all of the spoilers in here, so if you haven't seen it yet, don't watch this video, go watch the movie, then come back and let's talk all the spoilers. So, so start off, why don't we do our general overall thoughts on the movie before we get into specifics?
Sure. So overall, when I first left the theater, I went with my husband. It was actually closer to the very end of when they were showing it in trailers. In theaters rather. And so it didn't have that much of a crowd at that point, but I didn't care. I just was happy I got to see it in theaters, and I'm really glad I did. I grew up Mormon. He grew up Catholic, but he also, for a time, was a Mormon for reasons I won't get into. And so we each had a different dose of what it was like. And it was actually kind of cool. I was impressed with how well the characters acted like they were missionaries. Like, it felt so genuine. And then come to find out, it's because both of the actresses were Mormon. Both of them, I believe, went on missions. Like, this was an experience. Like, they were kind of method acting, really. And to me, that made all the difference, because they weren't training someone else how to do it. They just were able to take that and move in those ways. And I really loved how you have two different kinds of missionaries. You have the true blue Mormon version, which is Paxton, and then you have the one that's the convert. And I could definitely tell so many ways how she was a convert, but also how she was being treated differently because she was a convert. And I loved that whole dynamic. And then it was really weird seeing Hugh Grant, who, while I was growing up, was like the romance movie guy in so many things, and now he's the monster. It was really unnerving for me in that end. But yeah, absolutely loved the way that these little twists, these little, like, the labyrinth style kind of pieces came together, the sound, the sets, and just there were so many things that you have tropes and they cut them out from under their feet, and it's made it so it stood out from the other horror movies I've seen, especially a lot of the religious horror movies, because it played with some of those tropes but destroyed them as well. Um, the ending. Because of the last few shots, I had to go watch it again. It just was such a clever way to do it.
Yeah, which we'll get into all of that, especially the ending as well. I loved it when I saw it. I was like, I want everyone and their moms to see this because it was so good. Um, Especially like you mentioned, Hugh Grant did a phenomenal job in this role because there are times like up until um up until the first death, he had a way of like you knew the girls were in danger, but at the same time, you kind of forget at moments that they're in danger because he has this charming, charismatic way of making you let your guard down and think, okay, he's not that bad. He's kind of weird, kind of eccentric, but maybe he's not that bad. And even though I knew it was a horror movie going into this, but I still, the first time watching it, I still ended up letting my guard down to the point where I was actually surprised and shocked when he kills um, Sister Barnes.
Right?
I was not expecting that
No.
because, again, it he does a good job at lowering your defenses, even though we can see for the two characters, the Sister Burns and Sister Paxton, we can see for both of them, they're getting more and more scared and nervous and anxious, which should clue us into we should be feeling the same. But at the same time, again, he does a good job at making you put your guard down and making you think, okay, he's not gonna actually do anything too bad, too terrible. Like, this is to teach them some kind of lesson, and he's doing these weird things, but he'll eventually let them go. Um, so, but of course, that is not the case. That is not what happens. And so, I love the direction this went and the questions it makes you ask along the way, um, especially the way he sets it up. And a lot of this is just him talking and having a conversation. And so you would think that it wouldn't be all that interesting. Um, you would think that it would be uh, more boring or slow um, until it gets to more of the cat and mouse trying to escape uh, parts later on. But I was actually really, really engaged and interested in the first half of the movie when it was just them talking. I was like, this is so fascinating. This is so engaging. And I think, again, that's what lowered my guard was because there was so much of that. And then, what was I going to say? The ending, which we will get to, but I thought my voice picks now to start.
You're fine. I have those days.
Yeah, but the ending, I think, does a great job at kind of leaving things ambiguous and open-ended. And anyone who knows me knows I hate open-ended stories. Because I'm like, why do I have to make it my own ending? If I wanted to do that, I would have written the story myself. I actually think it worked perfectly in this movie. Um,
Yeah, the ending, like, that was even on the way back home, and we went all the way to Salt Lake, so I had like a 45-minute hour drive just to sit and think kind of about what I just saw, and kind of talking with my husband over it. Now, actually, kind of the way that conversation really went was getting hung up on the term Mormon. So, bit of housekeeping for anybody who's watching this, for anyone who's like, Mormon's a slur, that's not what we're called. For starters, Gordon B. Hinckley was my prophet. He's the one that pushed the I Am a Mormon campaign from the beginning. It's nothing to be insulted by, it's something to be proud of. My family members from the very beginning called themselves Mormons, as did Joseph Smith. So I'm going to refer to us and the rest of you as Mormons. That's it. If there's something I'm referencing as like the traditional obeying, like ideal Mormon, that's usually TBM, true believing Mormon. And it's going to go back and forth. It's not trying to combine a massive group in one label. I understand there's nuances. I've been through all the nuances. Just let it be with whatever it's trying to be at that moment. And if someone wants to ask me in the comments later, cool. I'm happy to be like, yeah, it was this kind of Mormon that I was talking about. But yeah, that aside, because we were talking about how it was so few people in the theaters at that point, and we had to go to Salt Lake because where I live, they weren't showing it anymore. So we had to actually take a drive to get there. Absolutely worth it. But it did. I did keep saying, I wish the other Mormons would see this. I wish Mormons would go see this, but they won't because the church is telling them not to. In fact, when the trailer first barely came out, I think even before the trailer, the church press put out a notice that this was an evil movie, that it was, quote, portraying violence against women, and that it was supporting that should happen, especially violence against religious women. And that's what the messaging was. And you saw the movie. That is definitely not the message that I got.
uh-uh.
So yeah, the whole idea of wanting other Mormons to go see this, there was a time that I was like Paxton. Like when I talk about TBM me, that's Paxton. Like that's if 15-year-old me kept staying that dedicated to the church. That would have been me at 21, not 19, because that's back before they changed it. But that would have been me. And so, like, watching Paxton this whole time, like, I saw so much of myself, and it was sad because I know there's so many other people that would have related to her, but they're not going to watch this movie. And I think so many of them would benefit from this. Um,
And
yeah, I wish that they would go see it.
I think that goes into kind of the whole theme of the movie and what Hugh Grant's character was getting at
Yeah.
when he says the only true religion is control.
Yep.
When Paxton figured it out, she's in the basement and she says, I'm not here because I chose to be. I'm here because you, I forget exactly how she said it, but
You
like,
wanted me to be.
you wanted me to be here. Like, you designed it in a way to where I would make certain choices to end up here. And, to his point, it's that's what religion does as well, especially when you're birthed into a certain religion and raised in it. It manipulates or controls in a way for you to live a certain way, be a certain way, you know, think, talk, act in certain ways. And all of that is controlled by um, whatever religion you belong to. And so that I think was great. But another thing I think, which is why I really like the end as well, is going back to what I was saying, is the end being ambiguous the way it is. It doesn't tell you one way or another whether you should believe or shouldn't believe. It leaves that question for the audience up to you. So we kind of have that question is posed to Paxton and Barnes in the movie, but us as the audience, we get that question posed to us by the end of the film. Which door are we going to choose, belief or disbelief? And it does a great job at setting up the all the arguments. Maybe not all, but like a lot of the arguments for both sides. It does a great job at setting that up and letting you go. Here's the pro side, here's the against side. Which door are you gonna go through? Um, and I think it does that. It kind of does that in two ways. I think because um, in the end, when Paxton dies, quote unquote dies, there is debate on whether or not she did die in the basement or she actually escaped and made it out, um, like we see towards the end. And it leaves it, like I said, ambiguous enough that you could argue for either way. So, in that sense, there's also that, okay, do you believe she made it out or do you disbelieve and think she died in the basement? Um, I
I didn't even
first,
think about if she actually made it out. Like I was totally thinking this whole time, yeah, she actually made it out. But so even then,
see,
like at which point does my disbelief start in that whole movie?
and
Like
that's interesting because from my first watch, I disbelieved and I thought she died in the basement and she hallucinated everything that happened for her to escape.
a near death experience.
hmm
Huh. Okay.
It's like they were talking about earlier. You have the near death experience where your mind starts to hallucinate and see things um, that are not real. And I land on the disbelief side. One, because we saw Sister Barnes die. Like, uh, we saw, I forget his character's name, Hugh Grant.
Reed?
Reed.
There's a few ways I remember. He reads a lot. He's a Mr.
Right.
Reed.
Yeah.
I think she actually jokes about that at one point.
She does. But we see Reed, not only, did he slice her throat, but after that, when she's laying on the ground, he cuts into her arm and is fishing out the implant, her birth control implant. And
that had a moment where I laughed the second time I watched it. I should not have laughed.
Well, and he's pulling on veins as he's doing this. And I'm like, okay, from the time that happens to the time right before we see Reed get knocked out by Barnes. I'm like, she would have definitely have been dead way before that and then. And so there's no way I think she came back to help Paxton in that final moment. And so I think one, she was dead. Two, if we go back to remembering her conversation with Reed about the butterfly dream, and he explains the butterfly dream is, am I a man dreaming I'm a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming that I was a man? And not knowing, reality and stuff. And we see at the end when Paxton, quote unquote, escapes, she goes outside and a butterfly lands on her hand. And it's there, but then it disappears. And we're kind of left wondering, was it really there or not? And I think that one, it ties into that conversation earlier, but also the conversation of when Paxton said in the beginning, when I die, I want to come back as a butterfly and I'll land on the fingertips of my family or friends so they would know that it's me. And we see that happening to her at the end. So that's, all those pieces together, I think is kind of what made me. Also, I believe when she goes outside, like inside the house, they didn't have any cell signal to call for help. But when she was outside, when she climbs out and goes outside, she drops her phone, and it looked like on the phone it still said no signal, even though she was outside.
Huh.
And so, yeah, I didn't catch it the first time until someone pointed it out in a comment on a review I was watching. And I went back and looked, and I was like, oh, wow, it does. And so that further made me think she died in the basement.
So after I watched it the first time, I watched one review comment video on it. I haven't even touched the IMDb. I'm going to, just to see how much more I've missed, but it's been essentially my view on it. I don't think this is the first time we've really talked about the movie. Mm-hmm. It was more of the, hey, you saw it? Yeah, I saw it. Oh, I want to talk about it. And that was it. Like, we kind of left it at that.
Yeah.
So there was definitely, like, for me, that was the final question I had to answer, was the butterfly there or not? Because now if you want to go, like, from the audience's perspective, at what point do you think they're dead, or are they dead? That wasn't ever a question for me, really. And I think if you want to get really meta, A24's becoming one of my favorite studios because
Mine too.
they are so good at doing this with horror movies or
Mhm.
with any other genre, really. But yeah, they make you stop and think about the whole film as a piece of art. So yeah, if you want to think, like anytime I go to a movie, suspension of disbelief immediately happens. It's the way I enjoy Star Wars movies. That's the way I enjoy Disney, everything. I have to force myself to stop like thinking like a grown brain, big, intelligent adult. Like I have to put that aside. It's hard for some things, but yeah, when you do it with this one, I guess that's what I did. Like immediately walked through the belief door. Whatever I see on the screen is happening. And I've watched so many horror movies too, where like, that of course my husband's a huge gigantic fan of the Scream series, and the killer always wakes up. He always has to die twice. Like every now and then you get like the one of the other characters gets to come back and save the other one so they can run away. And so yeah, when Barnes shows up like again, I was like, oh yes, it's that moment, sweet. And then also in my note, I put the dead woman comes to life and saves her companion, because that's what Reed was talking about earlier. Would be a miracle is the dead woman coming to life
Mm-hmm.
to show like here's proof of a miracle. So in the movie, we get a miracle, at least the way that I was watching it, and I thought that was really kind of cool.
And I think they
And
meant,
then
I think that's how they meant it to be, which is
yeah,
why I think it's so great because you can look at it in that sense that, hey, a miracle did happen and she
yeah,
was able to escape from it. So that would be the belief door you went through.
yeah. And
Uh,
then of course with Paxton, the way that she gets injured severely is a stomach injury, which is from what I keep hearing and seeing, uh, is the longest injury that you can survive uh, before you die. So to me, yeah, she would have been bleeding, but it would have been long enough for her to at least get out of the house. Uh, Now, when I actually stop and think about it now, how does she know how to get out of the house? Because she doesn't know all the lock mechanisms. So yeah, maybe she finds his bedroom or something else. I don't know. But in my mind, yeah, of course she could have made it out of the house because it's a thing. But
well, she found
yeah,
the little miniature design of
yeah,
the house, I think, and I think she figured out a way from there. Um, but yeah, it's still a lot to like, eh, a lot of things to think about and consider too. Because when I watched it the second time, I was trying to watch that scene to see if I can pick out the specific moment where okay she's dead and or dying and it this is when it becomes a hallucination and none of it is real. I was trying to see if I could pinpoint that moment and I couldn't really find that moment where I could pinpoint that happening. um At the closest I got was I think maybe if um if it was all a hallucination and she was dying, the only thing I can think is maybe uh Reed did like because we saw him crawling towards her and wanting to like finish it. He was about to cut her throat like he did with Barnes. And so maybe he did end up doing that, but we didn't see it. And so she hallucinates that she was saved at the last minute. That's the only part where I'm like, if there were to be a switch, it might have been in that scene, but it's done so well that you don't really know. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to tell either way.
There was one thing I loved that they kept doing uh, to lead you to the moment of the butterfly at the end. Uh, I didn't see anything to do with it before they got to the house. But as soon as they walk in, one of the first things that I'm pretty sure it's Barnes that notices is the butterfly that is on the window and then flies up because it's attracted to the ceiling light. But it gets stuck in the ceiling light, which I get, it happens to bugs. Usually moths, though. So, um, but every time there was something that kept bugging me about that ceiling light. Did you notice the cover's inverted? Normally, when you've got a ceiling light, the bowl hangs down so that it catches like anything like dead bugs that might go up there, and it also diffuses the light more. But this time, it's facing down, so the bowl end is towards the ceiling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So okay. For one of my jobs, I was in and out of a lot of different houses. I never once seen a ceiling light cover inverted like that. So that part was just really unnerving to me. I don't know how many other people noticed that, but it bugged me to the point where I took a picture of it to see if I was like losing my mind. But then they get to the part in the basement with the first part of the basement, and you've got a bowl shape and you've got a point in the ceiling that's the sole point of light.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the butterflies are stuck. He talks about the whole butterfly dream, the butterfly effect also gets mentioned, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But then when they talk about when Paxton says what she would want to return as a butterfly, it happens when Reed is asking Barnes if she's seen any sign of her dad, which her dad dying was what triggered her mom to start looking for a religion that would help her cope with that death. And I can get to why Mormonism is the one that she would latch onto. But yeah, Barnes is of course, she's struggling to not be upset with this guy. She's supposed to be, trying to convince the church.
Right.
And like Paxton is, trying to make it less awkward. And that's when she says that, when she dies, she wants to appear like a butterfly and land on a family member's hand, not their head or anywhere, just on their hand, so they know she's okay, which that is exactly what happens at the end. My thought is that's her imagining Barnes coming over saying that she's okay, so that she can let Barnes move on.
Which is what I've heard some people say as well. They thought that was Barnes on her hand. And the reason I thought maybe it was her is because of the whole butterfly dream. Am I a butterfly dreaming I'm a man, or am I a man dreaming I'm a butterfly? And so it's like I connected it with that conversation, which is why I thought maybe it was herself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many, and I'm sure that there were other references. Like, I do want to go back and watch again, piece by piece, that final basement hallway where she sees all of these different religious icons.
Right.
I want to see if there's any that have a butterfly. I know that the death moth, like the death head moth, is a big deal in a lot of pagan ones. Not necessarily the death head moth itself, but there are at least a few pagan religions where moths are considered messengers between the dead and the living. One experience I've had actually involved that kind of scenario. It is one thing, I don't believe in anything really supernatural, but that is one experience I've kind of like, that's mine, I'm not letting go of that. But yeah, and that's also why that last scene hit me hard. The whole idea of the butterfly coming back to say goodbye. But it bothered me. And so when I watched it the second time, I made the connection. The whole movie is it there? Is it not? Do you believe the butterfly's there? Do you not believe it's there? Does Paxton know that the butterfly's there because of how it makes her feel? Or like when she was praying at the end, does she understand it's not real, but it's beautiful to think that her companion is all right? So like that's the final that's the interpretation I've got of the butterfly showing up at the end. Also, just the way that Reed presents himself every time, all I can think of is that cringy but friendly old man, like you're that odd uncle that he tries. He says, I'm sorry if I'm saying this wrong or if I'm like saying something offensive. I'm not trying to. He's cringy, but he's like, okay.
Which is what
he still does that.
It's what gets you to lower your guard, right? It's what made me go, okay, he's creepy, but I don't think he has any like malicious intent. So that's why I was like not expecting that killer turn in the third act. But yeah, because up until that point, you kind of see him as the old guy who's eccentric and kind of weird and off, but seemingly harmless. Especially because he kept saying, "You're free to leave anytime. You're free to go anytime." Like no, which is interesting because this is something I thought about after I watched it the first time, and I still kept thinking it the second time around, and I was like, okay, up until the part they get into the basement, he hasn't been pushy with them. He hasn't been like forcing them to, come further into the house or go a certain way or whatever. And so I kept thinking, now, if he told them the door is on a lock timer, it's not going to open again till morning, what if they had said, okay, we'll just sit out in the living room and wait until it unlocks in the morning? What would have changed? Like, how would he have gotten them to go down to the basement if they were insistent on staying in the living room? Is my question there.
Yeah, and that whole thing that you're free to leave whenever you want. When he said that, like knowing the character's background, being missionaries, the church that they're missionaries for, you can hear that a lot. Like, oh, they're free to leave. Why do they don't have to stay if they don't believe? Why do they keep coming to church if they don't believe anymore? I heard that. I was told that. I might have said it to other people. So they probably thought they were fine until he really got to the uncomfortable questions, which Barnes in some situations was more okay with, because I was so jealous of her. I wanted to be able to have conversations like her when I was a teenager about the church, but I could only have them like Paxton because I only knew the scripts. I only knew that here's the right answer, here's what you're supposed to say. But Barnes was a convert, so she didn't have that drilled into her, so she could have conversations about difficult topics. And so they didn't always bother her right away. But I think at that point they no longer had a choice. And that's the other thing. Every time he kept saying, "Well, I told you," like when he says, "Well, I said that there was metal in the walls, and you said you were fine with that."
Mhm.
That's the same thing that they do with 8-year-old kids getting baptized. They say, "Well, why did you? We told you, you know, we thought you knew what you were getting baptized into." That's the same thing that they do with 18, 19-year-olds who are attending the temple for every ritual for their first time, and they find out how freaking creepy it is,
Mhm.
and they get the same reaction. Well, we've been telling you like what you should be prepared for. They don't tell you anything really about what happens in the temple. Only recently have they finally, like in the first moment, saying if anyone's uncomfortable, you can leave now. But they still don't tell you what you're going to be uncomfortable about. So it's the same thing. So yeah, they were, once they walked through and the door was closed, he was not genuine about the you can leave. He was never going to be. He
Mhm.
lied about the lights being on a timer
Mhm.
because he could turn them on himself later.
Yeah. Um, what was it? Yeah, it's kind of losing my train of thought. The whole it goes back to the whole control aspect that is like so ingrained ingrained and baked into religion, and it's the whole, not just, you know, you can leave whenever you want, but even the whole free will debate, right? We have
Mm-hmm.
free will, you can do whatever. But when you're looking at a lot of the mainstream religions, especially Christianity, they say you have free will and it's all about choice and you're not forced into anything, but that's not true either. It's not
Absolutely.
a choice, it's not free will, because you can't say, you know, either you can choose to worship or not, but if you don't, you're going to suffer and burn for all eternity. That's not a choice. That's like putting a gun to someone's head and
Mm.
going, you know, you can choose option A or option B, but if you go with B, I'm going to have to shoot you in the head. Like, that's not really a choice. You're basically telling me I have to pick option A unless I want to get shot in the head. And so, and that's the thing, a lot of religions do that, goes into the, back to what we were saying, the theme of the movie is the only true religion being control.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about it is about control and manipulation, and basically putting certain choices in front of you to make you go a certain way. um, and I think it was well done, especially with which you could probably speak more to this from the ex-Mormon side, but how he played on their beliefs and knew what they would do, what what he expected them to do, um, based on the beliefs they were raised with, they came in with, um, and just like I lost my train of thought again.
It's like if they would try to actually challenge him on anything,
Mm-hmm.
or stick with, even though they were very uncomfortable, remain with whatever they were told to be, no matter how that situation was. Because that happens a lot. Uh, when you, and again, I never served a mission. I was never worthy enough to serve a mission by the time I hit that age. But I've heard plenty of stories. I've seen like what they're actually doing with missionaries now. Um, and when you go on a mission, you are be kind of like boot camp in the military. You go in, it's a very short time, you get broken down essentially to be this very specific kind of salesperson. You're given the very specific lines to quote. You're given only so much, and it's crammed into you. I think that's like 4, maybe 6 weeks. You might get a little bit more time if you're going to a country where you don't speak the language, but you're only getting so much time to kind of learn the language, and then you're expected every morning to work on learning the language and still do the missionary stuff throughout the day. So that's why you can hear Barnes basically quote these scripts. Like, even when she's leaving through the belief door, she's complimenting him about how she's grateful that they were able to get such knowledge from him, and he has a lovely home. And that's what you do when you have a very
Mm-hmm.
controversial person that you were just visiting. You are supposed to still be that friendly on the way out, because you don't want to leave, a negative impression behind you. And so anytime you see them responding like that, that's what that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it happens with Barnes so many times, because that didn't start when she's on her mission. Or not Barnes, that didn't start with Paxton when she was on her mission. That's been something she's been learning her whole life, on those kind of scripts, on what to say. So
Well,
it was very funny to see how many horrible situations these scripts were being used in.
yeah. Well, and that's why I think it would be so interesting to see a scenario of this play out where someone doesn't follow any of the scripts that they're supposed to follow, and go off and does their own sort of thing and challenge him in that way to see like how does he shift, how does he change, because now it's like, okay, you're not operating how I thought you would, based on the belief faith system you're a part of. So how do I deal with this anomaly, right? Because one thing I've always said in my diversity interviews is that no group is a monolith. right? So just because you belong to a certain demographic or a certain group doesn't mean every single person in that group is going to think and act and believe exactly the same way. And so
Right.
just because you come from a religion where, these are the scripts you're supposed to follow, doesn't mean you can't break that. So I would have, they do break it a little bit in the movie, but I would love to see a character who breaks it even more, like from the very beginning. Because they
Right.
didn't start breaking the scripts until they got to a certain point, um, when they're going into the basement, towards the basement. But I would have liked to see a character who went off script much earlier and see how that affects things and how it would play out.
So that's actually kind of funny. I was wondering, uh, they do break scripts while they're still in the living room.
Oh.
Not necessarily Paxton, but Barnes does.
Mhm.
And it's subtle. And again, it's if you know kind of situation. But for example, when was it? Oh yeah, when he's asking how, like, basically how long have they been members? And Barnes is giving the born and raised in the church, daughter of one of 8 daughters, like, it's that typical thing how it is. And it's hysterical because she says she's from Ogden, Utah. That's my hometown. So now I'm wondering, like, which high school did she go to? It's her education was probably a lot like my education. And like I said, I see her as almost a mirror. But when Paxton is telling her story, the script that she should have gone with is, well, I'm a convert. My father passed away. My dad, my mom was heartbroken, and we were trying to find a religion that could help us work out how to heal with this. And when we were taught about eternal families being possible through Mormonism, we joined, and I've been doing all the work I can to seal my family so that we can be with him together forever. But that's not the script she gave. And watch it again. This time, watch Paxton's face while Barnes is telling her story. And because she's kind of like giving her the, like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. She's supposed to give the faith promoting version, and Barnes doesn't. She gives her genuine, conversational, my mom made this choice, doesn't explicitly say that she also believed and wanted to be baptized. Just so it's subtle, but Barnes already early on breaks the scripts. Even before they get into the house, there's that moment, of course, where the horrendous, rotten trio of girls pranks Paxton by pulling her skirt down and showing her garments with the whole magic underwear line, which I thought it was cool that magic underwear came back as a weapon. That was a really cool tie back. But Paxton is talking about how, they think Mormons are weird, and that's how she's taught to cope with this whole, it's a persecution complex, so that's why they did that to her. And Barnes is supposed to agree. Like, if she was, like, following the whole scripts, she was supposed to agree and be like, yeah, they're just, they're jealous. Like, we have all the truth, and it's just the adversary trying to lash out at us and get us to doubt. That would have been the response. But instead, she's like, well, I think you're awesome. Like, screw what they think. And the whole, like, the Book of Mormon musical you're not supposed to listen to any of it, let alone think that the couple of the songs are cool. Like, so yeah, before they go even into the house, you can already see that Barnes definitely is branching further away. You see a bit of it. You're trying to decide at the very beginning when they're talking about porno and condoms on the bench, which is one of my favorite scenes in a movie ever. But
that was an interesting
yeah,
way to open, I will say.
right?
I was like, what is going on here? Why are we having this conversation?
Oh, it was glorious. Oh yeah. Also, I laugh every single time I hear Paxton talking about how it was poignant that she was able to get confirmation that God exists
Because of the
after this porno, which she denies ever watching porno in the first place. So,
but somehow she watched this one and it was confirmation of God's existence.
exactly. And where she made that connection, I don't know. But yeah, and already you can see like Barnes understands it's not that big of a deal because she hasn't been raised in the culture like that. And so she's trying to like comfort her, be like, you know, it's okay if you have, but no, because in Mormonism, porn, any kind of porn is by default sex addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Any amount. So when she's like, well, have you watched? She's like, no, of course not. Like they send teenagers to these horrendous camps because they masturbate and it's horrible. But yeah, that's porn in Mormonism. Like you are not allowed at all. It can be grounds for divorce, like because your husband isn't being faithful and he's a porn addict now. Like it's yeah, so that whole scene watching like that she managed to somehow get a faith confirmation out of that. It was great.
And I kind of saw that as like um her. I kind of saw it as like, you know, operating through her worldview lens, right? Because it's trying to think what's that term called? Um, confirmation bias, I think.
Yeah.
Is what I'm thinking of when it's like, you know, whatever you believe, you're going to filter out situations and scenarios through that belief lens. So, you know, Paxton already believing in God and believing in the faith that she grew up with, of course, would look at the situation, something like this, and see it as confirmation of God's existence. Whereas someone else who doesn't would just see it and be like, it's a point. It didn't mean anything. There's like no
Right.
thing to get out of it.
You know, and like, because if when a woman is being loud and someone in the next room says, "Shut up, we can hear you," and the thing that she mutters is good, it's not a sign that she's thinking about her life choices and now she's ashamed and Paxton is grateful that, oh, that's not me. That's not what's going on. When she says good, she says, great, I am doing awesome at this. Like, I want you to hear me. So, yeah, it just was even funnier that she got, but that little thing is actually something that they will do in church talks all the time. They will say like there was this woman or there was this family or I was told of these neighbors or something like that. somehow we're semi-anonymous, and they will tell their story but put a specific lens on how you should view that story. And they'll say, oh, they ended up this way because they no longer believed, or because someone was unfaithful, or that's what they do. They will make anything into this faith promoting story, even if it's totally not what's going on. But that was the first time I've ever seen it done with a porn scene.
Yeah. That definitely was, I think I would say, a memorable opening for any movie, especially horror.
Right? Like, and it even funnier, like, because, you know, there's always the whole trope about, like, sex being, like, the thing that kills people, like, the virgin survives, like, all of that.
Which, oh my gosh, now that you said that, now that I think about it, that actually kind of gives more of a more evidence or lending point to your belief of the end where she survives, because Paxton had the birth control and she died, so that could be
Yeah, Barnes did.
or Barnes
Yeah.
had, yeah, Barnes had the birth control implant and she died. So if we're going off horror movie tropes, you know, that's seen as like, okay, so the slutty one that had sex is dead, but the pure good virgin, which would be Paxton,
Who's
so
never seen porn.
who's never seen, you know, they survive. So it ties into the horror movie trope that gets made fun of a lot as well. So that's such an interesting thing. I just now thought about when you brought that.
Yeah, and because that's the other thing. I know that there are people who, and again, I'm even one of them. Still, you can't help it. If you know someone has birth control, your assumption is they're having sex, because why else would you not want to, like,
Well,
just the default mind, that's what you go to.
and that's the default. Especially if you are very sheltered and raised in a religion where you don't know much about birth control and other, because there's a whole ton of reasons why someone would have birth control or be on birth control even if they're not having sex. Heavy period flow is one reason to control that. That's why I got on mine. And so there's like so many other factors to consider with the birth control that doesn't have anything to do with sex. So
Yeah, like, I wish I'd have known, oh geez, 25 something years. I wish I'd known a long time ago that an IUD would make it so that my periods were normal and not so painful and debilitating that I would have to miss school once a month for a whole day. And I thought that was normal. I didn't know how other girls were doing it. So, but no, I'm like early 20s, I get an IUD and suddenly they're fine. Like, I don't know, maybe that was what was going on with Barnes, is she was able to figure out this helps. And that's all it was.
mm-hmm.
But because that's the thing, if you are having sex, you have to stop way before you go on your mission. I think they say like at least 6 months typically is the rules that they'll put in place before they'll decide, yes, you're worthy to go. So I don't know how long she'd gotten that for. I don't know if she got it after she was a convert, but yeah, I know that she was getting some judgment. And at first, I thought that Paxton was one of those people judging her. But when Reed starts using it as a she's not real, this is all a virus kind of chip thing, Paxton goes off. She's like, no, that's birth control. And it's not just because she's having sex, like she knows. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised at that. But going back to like the whole, would it be a different scenario if there was someone more willing to break the rules? Yeah, if someone other than Paxton was with Barnes as her companion, like if there was another woman that knew how to navigate the worthiness question in order to stay on her mission and was able to be more open with Barnes, that would have been a bit of a different movie for sure. But for a lot of people who don't know, missionaries police each other. Like, you are not allowed to be without your companion in the same room unless you're going to the bathroom. And even then, if you suspect your companion is doing something they're not supposed to while they're in the bathroom, you can report them. And it's crazy, like, how intense they get. So, of course, some people are lucky to have a companion that's not as intense on the rules, but you aren't sure how tense how strict your companion is until you maybe find out the hard way. So that's why at the beginning I could tell they were still kind of trying to feel each other out. Barnes is like, well, maybe she's okay and I should comfort her. But Paxton is like, no, she might actually be trying to get me in trouble. Like, I think that's part of that dynamic. And that did feed into that first scene when they're in the living room. One of the things that my husband didn't understand was why they weren't communicating with each other that much when they're just on their own. And that's part of it. Because there is so much policing of each other, they haven't built that relationship where they can trust each other. So that's why it's very little when they're in the little chapel room and Paxton finally does a small text of run, that she finally starts feeling like, okay, we need to actually be communicating and getting out of here. They do it a little bit when they're figuring out something is wrong before they go to the chapel. But yeah, that's why they're not allowed to build trust with each other, and they bounce around companion to companion so quickly, relationships don't stay. So it's one of those, if you know, you know, but it's really weird to other people, which honestly adds to the tense part of the horror. So it kind of worked.
It's interesting now knowing that, because I didn't know how much peer policing that happened would be going on, and that you guys the missionaries would switch companions often. But it does make more sense and put some things into more of a perspective as to, like you were saying, why they weren't, talking very much when they were alone until, they started getting uncomfortable. Then, they started communicating a bit more. But up until then, it was very like we were saying, even with that conversation in the beginning, the opening conversation about porn, it was so awkward, and you kind of don't At least I didn't think it would have been that awkward if they knew each other for a while and had been doing this together for a while. Um, which, when I saw the movie, not knowing much about Mormonism, I thought them, they probably did know each other for a while and were doing this. And so, and that's why some of the conversations come off feeling awkward and knowing that it makes sense.
Yeah, it was just a little detail. That's why I was like, they've done really well with these characters. Because those first few sequences where they're like, if it weren't for the fact that they were wearing the same clothes throughout, that conversation on the bus bench would very easily have been them getting to know each other day one.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it just, but knowing that they were still trying to get to know each other, and that was definitely not day one, still kind of, it's sad. And the way that I know that is because when it goes back to the actual Mormon church during the storm, and the elder Matthew, I can't remember, he shows his name tag like once, so I can't remember his actual name. But when he's cleaning the church and goes into the bathroom and washes his hands, there's that list of sign your name when you're finished with your chores. I can tell like that they've been doing that for a while together, because that seems to be like a daily sign off kind of thing. Also, the reason that he's cleaning the church and not a professional cleaning service, the church decided that it was too much money about 5 years ago. So they make local members sign up to go like clean it out of their own time, and they don't get paid. And they have whole families go. So you have like a mom and a dad, maybe if the dad isn't doing something else for the church that day. And then however many kids she has, some maybe are helping, some are trying to watch the younger ones, and the younger ones might just be running around the chapel. But yeah, so that's why he's there cleaning the church late at night and not in case that bugged anybody. So that's why, anyway, it gives me the idea that this was not their first day together, and why this still was so awkward for them to talk about things that you might have been able to tell someone if you've been living with them for a week.
Yeah. I was also going to say, since we're talking about the elder character, I think it also goes to show just how ingrained it is in the members to always be evangelizing or proselytizing to others, because we see him go to read and ask if he's seen the girls, which of course he lies and says no, he hasn't seen anyone all day. And then he's like, okay, and then he leaves, and then he comes back and rings the bell again. And at that point, we're kind of thinking, okay, maybe he saw something to be suspicious of. Maybe he saw the bikes. Maybe he knows the girls are there and he's gonna, question them more. And all he does is like, I'd be
remiss.
give you one of these. And it's a pamphlet for the church. And I was just like, wow. I really thought he was coming back to like, he figured something out and he was gonna be able to help the girls. And it turned out he wanted to, proselytize.
That made me laugh so hard in the theaters. And I think, I know I was not the only one that laughed at that. It wasn't my husband, but the other person who did laugh also understood why that was so messed up and why it was so funny. but also so on point with what would actually happen. Oh, the other thing with it, okay, so of course you've got the whole like men all have the priesthood, and so they can do things like blessings and all sorts of things. But you also have the whole I prayed and found my car keys thing. Well, that's like escalated in Mormonism like crazy. So there's part of me that was yelling like, why weren't you listening to the Spirit of the Holy Ghost, who would have been telling you, press this man more, something is wrong, this is your guy, like. So that's, the whole Exmo side of me is like, I was right, see, he has no clue. But anyway, I'm glad it didn't focus on him too long. And we definitely got more of the focus on the three characters. It was a great detail.
It was. What was I gonna say? There was something else.
I'm sorry if I made you lose your train of thought again. I do that.
That's right. It happens all the time.
Okay.
It's funny because you've seen Inside Out, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I love it as well. But when I saw it the first time, and they're trying to catch the train of thought, that's what I'm always losing all the time. I don't know where it goes.
There it goes. Bye.
Yeah.
No, I just have chemo brain where it's like thought is gone. So yeah, that I found out.
I have ADHD brain, so it's
yeah. So between the two of us, like that's why we have such good conversations.
Yeah.
So there was sorry, if you remembered, go for it.
I haven't remembered yet, so go for it.
Okay. So one of the things I absolutely loved, like that part with the pamphlet, is how many funny moments there were. So like, yeah, there was a part with the pamphlet. There was talk about like sex stuff on a bench that advertised condoms. And so that was a couple of them. The part with him digging through trying to find the implant, I thought that was funny just because of how it was sold. Because he's digging through, thinks he found it and says, nope, that's a vein, and keeps going. I'm like, I shouldn't have laughed at that. But it just was, the delivery was so good.
It was.
But then my favorite part that anytime this movie gets mentioned is Monopoly.
Yes.
The way he did Monopoly.
That was a good scene.
Oh, even in the movie theater, like the Bob Ross one comes up and
the zany offshoot version.
The zany one?
You have the original, the popular modern version, the more popular modern version, or forget how he said it.
Yeah, and the OG, the modern, or the most popular, and then the modern version.
Right.
Of all
and
that.
Then the zany offshoot cousin.
And just the close up of the whole board, like the whole, like everything, where all you can see is just the cover of the game, Bob Ross's face smiling down.
But
oh, it was good.
That example he does with the Monopoly, goes to show his point of how like nothing is truly original. Everything is an iteration of something that was created hundreds, thousands of years ago.
Yes.
And that's the way to his point, that's the way it is with religion as well. As he points out all these other religions that predate the Abrahamic religions. And they predate them, but they also have so many similarities and parallels. There are religions that, the Jesus being the Messiah, Savior. There are other religions that have the story. Um, the what was it? The flood in the Bible. There's other religions that predate Abrahamic religions that have the same story. Um, and just we see all these stories, how he talks about, they're all copies of a copy of a copy, right? Um, and so I thought that was really interesting. And, well, it was a really funny scene with the Monopoly analogy. I thought it brought up a good point for the characters and for the audience to think about as well when it comes to the whole belief or disbelief um, uh, debate or question. Because it's like, what? Okay, so if all of these are copies of a copy of a copy, and they're like echoes of the original one, we don't really know what the original is or looks like in its original form since it's, back so many thousands of years back. Um, kind of hard to know what, the very first looks like, but also just the whole, let's see, it goes into the whole, uh, his question of the one true religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he tells them. He's been on a search for what's the one true religion. And, if everything is a copy of a copy of a copy, well, how do you get to the one true, the one uh, true source, so to speak? Especially since every single copy claims to be the true one, right?
Yeah. That was absolutely one of my favorite parts to watch over and over. Was because so the first time in the movie theater, I I'm relatively new to the whole like uh, apologetics and religion and atheism and everything in that community. Uh, so when he's talking about all of these different things on the wall, uh, I barely started to scrape the surface of that. So there were stuff like when he's talking about Mormonism. I'm like, yeah, he's right on that. He's absolutely right on that. That was fine. I was totally able to handle that. But when they're in the chapel and he's talking about iterations, that's when I start drowning mentally. I'm like, I don't know. I'm as lost as the other two women in that scene, really. And so it's still really fascinating to watch that whole part and start figuring out, okay, so what about this part do I understand now? Oh, is he talking about that part? Is that actually real on what's going on? I start questioning him every time I watch it myself. And then, so when Barnes is the one that pushes back, she's right on a lot of fronts. Like, he ignores the part about the Holocaust.
Right.
When he's calculating these numbers, because I've heard that same thing. Like, well, Jews don't have missionaries, and that's why Mormons are doing okay. Absolutely, that's not why they don't. Like, so yeah, to hear him use these arguments that I am currently hearing that are
Also,
really valid, but also really wrong in other ways, it's really fascinating to hear that.
Also, he neglects, to Burns's point as well, not only does he neglect, the Holocaust and stuff. But a lot of Jewish people are culturally Jewish, but they're atheists.
Yes.
So there's that too.
Yeah, and it's like I know people that consider themselves culturally Mormon, which there's part of me I'm like, yeah, I guess I could fit in that box, but I just don't want to identify with it at all anymore. I did that enough of my life. But yeah, that's also a thing that does happen. Which is why at the beginning I said, if I say the word Mormon, it's not because you don't fit in that box. It's just, it depends on what version of Mormon I made at the moment. Culturally Mormon is one of those things. And that was really kind of cool to hear her push back on a lot of these arguments. And even then, like, I love how she says, and one of them has a freaking bird for a head. I'm like, that took a lot of guts for her to do that, especially as angry and sad she was getting because he was pushing all of her buttons and he knew it.
But you can also see that he liked it when she challenged him as well.
Yes. And that was a really cool dynamic. I loved that.
Yeah. And he reveled in that challenge. He wanted that pushback, and you can see, like, I think he kind of craved that intellectual stimulation. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to challenge you on this. You challenge me on this. Which again makes me wonder again if what would have happened if they did not continue going through the door, but just having this back and forth debate or challenge on theology, especially it really gets to me because I'm like, especially considering that the elder came to look for them. Like, if you know someone's coming,
had they just been in the living room still when he showed up,
right? It's like,
so funny thing. I think it was the third time I was watching this movie. I had this thought. Well, what if this were a different scenario? Like, how? Because I love the dynamic that Barnes and Reed have, where they can have a conversation. Because Paxton wasn't built that way. She was not allowed to have conversations about religion. You can't have a wrong answer when you're in a religion that there's only one true everything. Mm-hmm. And like, there's nuance, but I've seen people who are nuanced get kicked out of the church because all it takes is you are talking to church leaders as if you're equals, which you are. But because you're disagreeing with them, they can decide you're out. I've seen it happen. And so that's one of the, like, I was nuanced before I decided I no longer believed a bunch of it. So I love seeing Barnes and her nuance. And I loved seeing this guy who'd been researching and learning and on this journey most of his life. I loved seeing them have these actual conversations. And so back of my mind, all I could think of is Hugh Grant back in his romance days in those movies when he's the heartthrob. And what if this was a different movie? What if it was younger Hugh Grant and Barnes' character? And now it's not a horror movie. Now it's a romance. And the question is Paxton going to somehow convert him? And he's going to join the church for her? and she is flirting to convert like you do? or is he going to go with Barnes, and because they challenge each other intellectually so much, they're going to be the ones that end up together? Like, I don't know. It was a silly, weird little thought. But I had that thought for just a moment of like a different scenario in a different genre, what would it be?
Or will he challenge Barnes enough to maybe have her deconvert since
Exactly. Yeah.
she's
Would
not
he be able to tell her, you don't have to keep in the church just because that was your mom's choice?
mm-hmm.
Oh, and for people who've probably questioned, well, why does she stay? Why is she on a mission? Her mom is convinced that if they're worthy enough, if they stay in the church, if they do everything they're supposed to, they're going to get to not just see him again, her husband, her dad, all of that. They're not going to just see him again. They will be with him for eternity, tied together. Like,
And
that was the draw. That was why they joined. I know it. So that's also why she's on her mission, because that's one of the things that she's gotten the idea that she's supposed to do. And her mom is convinced of it. So she might be shaky on her faith, but it's what she's supposed to do. And so if it's just to help her mom feel like she's going to get to see her husband and her daughter and be with them for eternity, that's why she's still there. And that's why you can also still see her struggle with these questions of, do you believe in God? Do you believe in this? All of that.
so I have a question about that then. Um, so you said they're doing it to see and be with her dad, her mom's husband again. But if they weren't part of the church before, I would assume the dad wasn't either, right? So
No, because he passed away, and that was what triggered them looking for
right.
any kind of like real faith as a
Well,
coping mechanism.
my question then would be, because I know with Christianity, like most non-denominational evangelical forms of Christianity, if a family member dies without getting saved, without giving their life to Jesus, they're not going to be in heaven. So even if you convert and become a Christian and give your life to Christ and go to heaven, you're not going to see that. You're not going to be in the same place as your family member. So I guess I'm wondering in Mormonism how that's different. Like, how would they still be able to all be together?
Yeah, so that was one of the reasons why I stayed until I was like 36, 7. Yeah, it took a while. But one of the big differences, because I have heard similar things of, well, there's Christian religions where as long as you believe, you're getting into heaven, as long as this, and they're so minimal that they don't understand why that wouldn't be an option by default. But yeah, for the other religions where it's like, nope, you didn't do it right. You didn't get baptized before you died. So nope, you're done. You don't get any chances. Baptisms for the dead started way back in the beginning of the church. Joseph Smith had an older brother who he adored. But his brother died. And the church that they were attending, the story goes that the pastor, the priest, whoever he was, told Joe that because his brother wasn't baptized, he was going to hell. And that's what triggered Joe to hate that church forever. Like, it was, and so yeah, a few years later, there are a lot of other people that are dying off because of what they're calling persecution. And so a lot of people are devastated at all these lost loved ones. Not all of them have been baptized yet. Like, some are small children. Some off of violence, some off of illness. There's all sorts of craziness going on when they're brand new getting to Illinois. And And Joe gets the idea of baptisms for the dead, where you can get baptized, but you are a proxy for someone else. So it's kind of like saying, in the name of Jesus Christ, or in the name of God. You are a proxy for Jesus or God. Similar kind of thing. So you are a stand-in for that person. You get baptized in their name, which is a way of allowing them to get baptized. If, I know I'm sounding crazy to some people right here, if they accept the baptism in the afterlife, then they can get that marked off so that they are no longer being in hell.
So they still have to accept that baptism in the afterlife. So if they don't, then they're not going to be in heaven.
They're stuck in, if I remember right, they're stuck in basically like the Mormon version of purgatory or limbo kind of thing. They don't go to hell, but they don't get to any of the heavens, which that's a whole other. One day I'm going to do a whole plan of salvation with all of the crazy Mormon levels of marketing that you get to.
I've heard you have different levels of heaven that you can ascend
Yeah.
to.
But then also, it wouldn't have just been the baptisms, because with Mormonism, your whole family gets sealed, which I only recently learned means biblically back then, the term sealed meant turning a key. You are sealed to your family. You are locked together so that nothing can separate you. Which, depending on the family, may not be a great, future for eternity. But anyway, but the idea, after just losing her husband, would be really powerful. And that's something that also they get targeted. They target widows. They target a lot of other people who have just lost loved ones in horrible ways. And they prey on that. They don't intentionally prey on that, but that's what's going on. That's why they're targeting them. And it does make them easier targets.
And that's the one thing I really don't like about religion in general, because it's not just Mormonism, but a lot of them is they specifically get you when you're at a low, vulnerable point in your life. And it's that vulnerability that makes it so easy for them to, like you said, prey on them or, make them easy targets.
And like for me, the reason it took so long for me to officially decide I'm done, I'm taking my name off the records, I have no association anymore. I still, I didn't believe that the leaders had any authority. I didn't believe that the modern, revelation was actually from God. I believe that ended some time ago. And that everything that the church leaders were putting in place was horribly wrong. But I still believed I was sealed to my mom for eternity. And I did not want to lose that. I still believed in an afterlife. I'd already seen her lose 2 of her daughters to horrible things. In fact, one of my sisters that we lost was targeted by the church and was baptized about a year before she died. And I guarantee you, one of the things that they told her was about seeing her sister again. So it is powerful. It's this huge thing. And that's why, the whole thing at the end with the butterfly is such a big deal, because getting that confirmation that your family member, that your friend is okay, was a powerful thing to notice. And there's still a part of me that wanted to absolutely have that belief still. So I get that for sure. On why Barnes is still staying. Maybe there's part of her that does still believe that it is true. And it's not just something that she's doing for her mom, but she hasn't gotten that confirmation for herself yet. She's just kind of doing what she told. Another thing that they get told is it's okay if you don't believe right now. Going on a mission is a great way to gain a solid testimony. So that could also be another reason she's there.
Yeah.
There was one other little piece that is like an Easter egg. At the very beginning, when they're talking about porn, or not talking about watching porn, there's a moment where you see the book that Barnes has open on her lap, and she has, like, it's her copy that she's actually going through, at least in reading. And I can tell that she's only got one little thing, that little blue sticky note. I couldn't remember the word for a minute. But she's got this little blue sticky note sitting there. And that's definitely a bookmark. So that's where she's at so far in reading it. And it's her notes that she's making. But I get curious because it's a really short flash. This time when I was rewatching it outside of theater, I had a chance to pause. So I pause, and I'd like make out, okay, it's Mosiah chapter 22, verse 9, that she has rewritten in the really large margins of this book. So I look it up, and it's talking about this group of people who I believe are slaves of the Lamanites, which are the bad guys in the Book of Mormon. And they're trying to figure out how to escape the Lamanites. And there's a guy called Gideon who's on their side and says, I got a plan. You guys all get ready. There's usually a bunch of soldiers that are usually guarding the rear side of the walls. There's a back door. They usually get drunk there. I'll go out, make sure that they are all drunk so that you guys can all escape through the back door. And I was laughing so hard. I'm like, they had, from the very beginning of the movie, they had the idea of them leaving through the back door of the house as an escape. And it was such a little tiny actual use of the Book of Mormon in this movie.
Wow.
So yeah, in case anybody hadn't looked at what that was, you're welcome. I did it for you.
It's interesting how they included that detail, even though it's part of a scene where you probably barely see what she's writing or what the note is. So not only do you have to actually be able to pause to see what it is and then look it up, but yeah, that's interesting that they tied that in, kind of foreshadowing that end.
I can't. It was one of the 3.5 times I've seen this movie. I definitely seen this whole scene a few times, and I got curious this round, and I'm like, okay, what's with the book? Usually A24 movies, they don't do little pauses on things without intention. So I'm like, what are they doing here? So that's why I looked, and it just was the funniest little detail. There's another detail when they're going down the hall the first time, and they just see the bust that's like made to look like a man is standing there. I don't know who the bust is of, but I really want to find out.
There's a lot of moments that I missed the first time, but when I watched it again the second time, I noticed they pause when they first come into Reed's house. They pause on certain things in the room, in the environment, and I was like, oh, okay. Like the whole butterfly moth thing. and like the window and um, the picture frame and stuff. Which the picture frame, one of my thinking when they came into the house is, okay, shouldn't this immediately set off some alarm bells? Because one, there are no photos, no family photos anywhere in the house, no personal family photos. And the one small photo that they do have in the house is with Reed and his dog. And you're
I don't think
wondering,
that was Reed. That looked way too young for him. Maybe that was.
I thought that was like a young version of him.
Okay, here.
But
Well, here's why I know. I actually paused it, took a picture. I tried to do a reverse image search of this photo to like, okay, did he steal this photo from somebody and just put it in a frame?
I just assumed that was maybe when he was younger
I
and he had a
maybe.
dog, but I don't
But yeah,
know.
still weird that that was the only photo.
Yeah, and I
Um,
was thinking, like, why aren't there any pictures of him and this wife, the supposed wife, right?
yeah. And I'm like,
So,
okay, maybe that's their son and their son's dog. But still, my favorite is the cross stitch of "Bless this mess." What mess? This whole room is the beigest of beige.
mhm,
There's a knitting or crochet basket on a chair, but it doesn't look like there's any knitting or crocheting that's actually happened. Like I that might have been setting off red flags for you too.
yeah,
Just yeah, okay. Um yeah, just
just
little
there,
things.
there was several things in there, um, but that also makes me want to ask though, like, for you, since you kind of said you related a lot to Paxton, and she was kind of like the mirror image for you. If you were, uh, if you had gone on mission trips, mission visits, um, and you were in a situation like that, like, do you think, like, what would have been some red signs for you, or do you think you would have kind of not really noticed or pay attention?
So when I was growing up, a lot of homes um, had what they would call the bishop's room, or like it was like they might have called them like parlors back in the days, but it was basically like the not living room, but you would have things like chairs and coffee tables and a couple of nice knickknacks, and but everything would be very neat and ready for like, and they called it the bishop's room because someone like the bishop. Oh, bishop in Mormonism is the local congregation leader, like the pastor. Uh, so he's not like the bishop, like the Catholic bishop. So, but if the bishop showed up to stop by, that's where you would go with them. That's where you would sit and talk. And it looked also an awful lot like every Mormon chapel I've ever gone to. So it wouldn't have set off that many red flags. The bishop's room in your house would have been very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, your actual living room, like your actual bedrooms, they would have been more personalized with maybe a lot more family photos, things like that. But there weren't a whole lot of times where I saw that room, if you were lucky enough to have that kind of house, as very like lived in. So, which when they go to the chapel room in his house, I'm like, this is okay. Yes, this does make sense because this has Reed all over it. This is like him exploding onto every wall,
Mm-hmm.
and like all the stuff that he was talking about in the first room. This is it. Yes, this matches perfectly. So yeah, it wouldn't have set off that many red flags. Barnes, on the other hand, kind of knew something was weird.
Yeah.
Like when Paxton points to the "bless this mess," like she thinks it's cute. Barnes is like, where? But again, they're not communicating with each other. So they're not, Barnes isn't telling her, hey, isn't this odd?
Yeah.
So yeah, like I had to stop and think about that myself. Like, why isn't she thinking that something is wrong? And yeah, that is something I had to stop and wonder. And that's why it would have been normal.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm trying to think.
Oh, there is one thing that I kept struggling with while I was watching this movie multiple times. It hit me a little bit the first time when I saw it in theaters. But every single time after that, like I had to stop halfway through the fourth round because it was starting to hurt. The way that he's challenging them with, and I do appreciate that he at least said, I'm going to have some uncomfortable questions.
Mm-hmm.
His uncomfortable questions are things that I've talked with missionaries about. Like just recently, there were a couple of women that came by, and I've made a point. I do not turn away any of them for a few reasons, but I didn't mind their company. There's only been one time where there was a guy who was super pushy about why gay people were wrong, why abortion was wrong, like all of these things that I managed to change my mind on and just could not agree with the church's stance on. It was getting kind of sketchy with him, but every other person, it's been fine. Like I've just been able to invite them in, have conversations. This time they came by like 3 times. It was kind of cool. But I think after that they got told by their mission leader, hey, don't go back there again. Like she's not going to join. She's not going to come back. But I've had those kind of conversations. Like I pulled up newspapers showing when Utah became accidentally the 13th state with same-sex marriage, and the clippings showing when it happened and then when the ban went back in place. And because I was there, like I was able to point at the photos of couples and be like, I know them, I volunteer with these guys, and tell them like, does this not look like joy? How much happiness is in here? Do you not see the love here? And they did. Like they were able to see it, and they were just little when the reason that I officially stopped going happened. So I was able to talk with them about this uncomfortable topic, and they were able to talk with me. I mean, one of them, she also let me know she had ADHD and she had no problem with that script. I loved it. But I felt like I identified with Reed so much that I was starting to be like, am I the villain? Why am I identifying with the monster? Like, what is going on? And every time I was making notes, I kept coming to this of, am I the monster? Why is this the monster? Like, but then also these situations, Reed is being honest. He's being open. He's the transparent one. When, like, okay, take the topic of polygamy. This one hit deeply because you can see Barnes immediately switch into this panic mode, this just absolute discomfort. Like you can see her breath getting deeper, her chest rising. And that actress was really good to be able to do that at that timing. I'm like, this is not just like, that's one of those ways she was able to tap into her own experience. You can see the discomfort quickly. And because when I was growing up, you don't talk about polygamy. And if you do, the excuse I was given was it was because there were so many women and children left without fathers to take care of them after the violence that was done to Mormons, the persecution complex. And so because there were all these families, they needed a way to actually take care of them. And so some men were chosen to marry these families to be able to actually take care of them. That was the reason. And so then the reason on why it stopped was they were no longer needed. The kids had grown up. They had moved on. So it's fine. But what I wasn't told is that didn't stop far longer than the 10, 15 years that I was taught that it stopped. And so that, again, that was one of those moments where Reed was right. His suspicions on why Joseph Smith justified having polygamy did go back to his sexual affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like, Barnes is interested. Barnes is up for having a conversation. But when the reason that she's been given recently, which is likely the reason that you would give converts who bring this up before they're converted, her reason is conflicting with Reed's actual knowledge of the history. And so when she turns over to Paxton and says, well, is that true? I can hear just a little bit. I can hear the hurt in her voice. It's like, okay, wait, have I been being lied to? And so instead of telling her, like, no, he's wrong, and telling her, no, this is what actually happened, Paxton just ignores Barnes and just tells Reed, I don't know where you're getting your information. Just denies that he's even got accurate sources at all, which is normal because obviously she's been taught that Reed has been using anti-Mormon literature to find this information. So he doesn't have the correct answers. And just that little piece, that was just one of those moments where it was so accurate. And I loved Barnes being able to question both of them and then get ignored. And like, I know that hurt, especially in that tense situation where she knew something was off. But I've been like, again, feeling like, am I the bad guy? Am I doing the things the monster does? And knowing I've had those moments. But then also the church leaders are doing the harm too. The church leaders are lying. The church leaders are doing all of this, lying to converts just to get them in, just to get their money, just to get them dependent and stuck. And then missionaries pay for their missions. The church doesn't fund those missions. Barnes paid to be there.
Wow.
And so did Paxton.
Wow.
And a lot of that money goes right back to the church, which this whole conflict of who to me is the actual monster. Some of the times, Reed is the good guy when I'm watching these movies. And it just was crazy knowing what he was doing. Like, yeah, he's talking about like Joe hiding all of these women in secret while he's hiding women in the basement in secret, torturing them. Like, I know, it just was crazy. But
yeah, and also, again, which is why, like we were talking about earlier, it gets you to let your guard down and to trust them, because it does seem like he's being upfront and honest, right? He's telling them these things, just like he said when he told them, oh, you don't have to fake taking a phone call, you don't have to pretend. I know you didn't take a call because I asked you when you came in if you were okay with the metal in the walls and ceilings of the house, which blocks cell phone signals. And so you see moments where he is honest, and it now thinking about this more, it also makes me wonder if if in a way, in a sense, if he was meant to be like portraying the serpent in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the Genesis story with Adam and Eve, technically the serpent was telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
He told them, you're not gonna die. And they didn't. Not right then and there. Which is what, we would all assume was gonna happen. And so, um, you know, he's and it's interesting because while he is being honest, he's also being dishonest at the same time. And so he's kind of twisting things to his advantage, obviously, um, which is what made me think just now, like, is he meant to represent the serpent in um, in the garden? So I'm definitely gonna have to watch this again. I'm
Right.
probably gonna watch it again after we get done here. But because now thinking about all of this that we've been discussing so far has made me wanna go back and try to catch some of these moments and see um, look at it from those lens and see what I pick up this time. So
Yeah. And I haven't even mentioned, like, I've got so many notes. Like, I just went full on journal, pen to paper mode because I had so many thoughts showing up. But like one reason that this has become one of my favorite horror movies now is because of like what good horror movies do, what good horror stories do, is they take this event going on in society and they turn it into this monster that is supposed to be horrifying. And so it's this whole idea, like, and again, I can take it as this way personally because, growing up Mormon and him questioning a couple of Mormon missionaries. But like I have he's a two-faced monster. He's a two-headed monster. One is telling you the truth, the other is telling you lies. And trying to identify which one is it is the church? Is it the people who are trying to deconvert people? Like, which monster is he being at that moment? Like, it does have that mirror on it. And I really need to see what else people thought. Like, the only other video I've seen people do were a couple of guys who are Mormon, but I didn't hear them say anything negative about the church, about how they might have felt about the uncomfortable questions. Because yeah, another mirror is how much Reed is like most of the Mormon men in authority I've ever met, seen, or heard. He has that cringy older guy, but I'm trying persona. And yet, when you are one-on-one with these guys, they get to ask you very uncomfortable personal questions. And it's viewed as okay. So yeah, I love it. But yeah, it is a very good horror movie by every definition.
Yeah, it is. That's why I've been recommending it to anyone who watches horror. Like, you gotta watch it and tell me what you think. Um, uh, what was I gonna say? Oh, going back to your question before when you said you had to stop and ask yourself multiple times, am I the monster here? Um, and I would say no, only like you would become the monster if you did what Reed did.
Yes. I
Um,
don't
I
I don't
don't
have a secret room.
right. I don't think it's bad or monstrous to like challenge others on their thinking or their perspective, or trying to get them to see things through another lens, another point of view. I think that's what we should always be doing. um but it's when that turns into the point of manipulation and control and deceit, that's where you would be going into monstrous territory.
Got it. I feel better now. So thank you. So I
um,
guess if I were to do that, then um, I would have had them do like chores for me, work, clean my house, because that's something that they're told to offer people is if they can help around their house. And I'm like, only if I'm paying you. And they say, no, you can't pay us. And I'm like, okay, then I have homework if you want to help me with my speech therapy. And that's what we did. When they came by, they helped me with my speech. If I was talking to them and forgot a word, they helped me find it. And it was great. So
so so is that something they always have to do during a visit? Is offer to
they're
help?
told to. Yeah, they're told to lately. But again, because I won't let them do what they're told
Mm-hmm,
is work,
mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's one of the other reasons that they couldn't justify coming back. If I'd have said, "Oh yeah, I could definitely use some help, like catching up on laundry, cleaning up this room, whatever," then maybe they would have been coming back. But I'm shocked that they came back for 3 visits. Like that was a lot. It was great.
Wow. Although I wonder, so would they still come, like if you had given them work and they kept coming back, like but they weren't converting you, at what point do they stop and give up? I guess.
That depends on their missionary leader. Uh, each missionary is like not just part of their pair, but they also have like uh, a guy who's in charge of like I don't know how many pairs of missionaries, but ultimately he gets to decide if there's somebody they need to stop going. Like when Paxton says, sister, I can't remember her name, said that we should uh, kind of skip over you or put you at less priority. That's one of the things that she was talking about is one of their leaders said, don't go to that guy, like don't make him a big deal.
Mm.
But it wasn't because she had this premonition of that guy as a monster. It was he's not going to convert.
Yeah.
That's all.
Which, I had this another question earlier, which I forgot, but then now I remember. When So one thing that struck me as odd, even from the first time watching, I was kind of surprised that, like, I know the girls say they can't enter his home unless there's a female present. But I was surprised that they would even be assigned to go talk to a man anyway. I guess kind of coming from a more non-denominational background, I just assumed it would be like the women would be visiting with the women and the men would go to see the men. Um, I know in the church I went to before, that's how it was. It was like the guys, you know, teach and preach to the guys, girls with the girls, and there was kind of that separation. Not that there couldn't be some overlap, but generally speaking, if like someone was going to do a Bible study with the guy who was interested in learning more, it would be another guy going, not a woman. And so, but it doesn't seem like there's that differentiation with Mormons, is there?
So I think there's a few factors that they were able to put this story into this time. Normally, yeah, that would easily be the case. So one of the factors, Mormonism is so centered around the family. Okay, they're centered around the traditional family. If he put something like it was him and his wife that were interested, that might have been a factor that made them think he was safe to go to. But the other part is recently the church made this decision. Oh, wait, I mean, they had this revelation where they could change the age of missionaries, where men had to wait until they were 19 and women had to wait until they were 21 to go on a mission. They changed it so that men, as soon as they were done with high school, GED, whatever, and they were 18, could go. Women could go when they were 19. But there's a lot of reasons why. Part of that is how badly the church has been hemorrhaging members, like not just people like me officially leaving, but also so many people just aren't going, which means people aren't paying tithing, which means a whole lot. But there's also just a lot of people that just no longer care. I've gotten to witness this in local congregations where they're maybe a third of the size of the congregation as they normally were, like when I was growing up. So back when Paxton was back home in Ogden going to church, her congregation was probably relatively small compared to what it was when I was a teenager. So she would have been seeing this. She would have probably been getting pushed to go on a mission to help bring people back. So so when he says you guys are 19, 20, yeah, he's right on the money. They are that age. They're not 21 like they would have been a couple of years before this movie. So on top of that, you also had this flood. As soon as women were allowed to go sooner, you had so many signing up to be missionaries, so many wanting to go, because a lot of us did. We just weren't allowed to go until we were 21. By then, there was also a lot of pressure to get married and start having kids before you were 21. So a lot of us never went on their mission because we already had a family to raise. So yeah, there was this huge jump. So it doesn't surprise me that maybe there weren't enough male missionaries in that area, and they did happen to get assigned a couple of female missionaries. And I don't know too many more of the mechanisms on how they decide who goes where, other than there's this group in this neighborhood, try that. But generally, yeah, they do have a few things of safety, such as if you are a pair of sister missionaries, you cannot go in unless there is also a woman present. They had a similar thing even for the kids. Like when I was getting baptism lessons before I turned 8, I was already going to church. My family was already, active, going to church, baptized members, but I still had to have the missionary lessons just, because they wanted to make sure everything was the same as any convert. And my parents, of course, still had to be present when the missionaries came over. Part of it, I was a child. They needed to have at least an adult. Mm-hmm. If for some reason I was able to be home, but my mom was working for another hour, they could not come in. There's always been some kind of a safety mechanism in place. But that is one of the things that the church justified in its press release pushing back against this movie, because they said that they already have all of these safety measures in place so that this kind of thing doesn't happen. And that's why this movie is just making violence for the sake of violence. Well, however, at the same time, there is still so much violence happening. Missionaries are getting killed, even though they're being safe in all of these other places. Mm-hmm. It's the neighborhoods they're getting sent to are violent. Mm-hmm. But they still get sent there. It doesn't matter. So I don't know. There's a lot. But the way I look at that scene, yeah, if it was raining that bad and potentially about to turn freezing with a bad snowstorm, I would have been totally okay with stepping inside for a few minutes, waiting for his wife to show up. Yeah. But I don't blame them.
Oh, no, I don't either, and that's what I did see someone else, another ex-Mormon, who talked about the movie, who said the same thing, that if had it been her at that time, that age, and being so eager to want to convert someone, she would have gone inside too, especially when he says his wife is in the kitchen baking, so that would have been an easy, okay, we can come in. So, although maybe they should have the rule be, do not go in until you see the wife before.
Yeah, and I think sometimes they do stress that, but it's still gross that so many people would say, well, they broke the rules, so of course something's going to go wrong. Mm-hmm. It's the whole victim blaming mentality. Mm-hmm. It's insane. So, but yeah, I would have done the exact same thing in that situation. I can't handle the cold, even though I was born and raised in northern Utah. I don't do well as soon as it drops below 31 degrees. I'm done. So I would have been like, yep, I'm in, and then fine, if she's not here, we'll leave in a few minutes.
Yeah, I don't handle cold either, so even before then, I'm like, no. Yeah, so, okay, this has been such a great conversation so far.
We didn't even touch on the sound design.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, the candle. If there's one piece on the sound design that I love watching over and over, is when she turns the candle around. Mm-hmm. You don't see the label until after she does.
Right.
Same thing with the door. You don't see what's wrong with the doors until after she does. You just see her reactions. It's so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that was really, really good detail to add as well. But I was going to say, so kind of as we wrap up things, because I know it's been going almost 2.5 hours now.
That kind of tracks for us.
It was the same with Sinners, but is there any final thoughts or anything else you kind of wanted to bring up, make sure we get to before we end?
Let's see, of these, yeah, just there's so many things outside of just the story, like, that we didn't even touch on. The lighting, the little details. Like halfway, what am I on?
Three
So
and
I got halfway through the fourth run before I had to stop. I noticed finally he has a mug that says hubby when he starts talking about polygamy.
I didn't even.
And then I think about the women downstairs at the same time. And then when they're in the chapel, I finally noticed this time he has a big, like what are they called? A cobbler? The big glasses also saying hubby with the same print and color. Like, just silly little details, but
Interesting. Yeah, and now that you bring it up, you know, he talks about the polygamy and stuff, um, and meanwhile keeping several women caged up downstairs. Um, it's that whole, you know, hypocritical deceit thing all over.
yeah. And like we didn't even really touch too much on what goes in the basement in like the first room,
mm-hmm.
or what's in like the final room, or like her escape. And I think that's fascinating on its own, because there's so much to chew on before that in the slow burn of the movie. So it's so good. Yeah,
There's so much to it. But I will say the one thing with the women down there in the cages is one thing I was thinking about when rewatching it was, okay, so you know, these other women, are they from like different denominations or different religions? Because if if these are, let's say, all Mormon women that came to his door to visit with them and whatnot, I would think at some point the church would be like, okay, all of these women from our church is going missing, and it's always, when it's his visit, they say he always claims to have not seen them, but they've done their last visit, they left their last one, and never show up to his. So there's something there, either something mysterious is happening to them along the way to his house, or obvious he's lying and he's done something to them. So you would think, at least I would think, that there would have been some sort of investigation if enough of them were coming from the same church, that there would have been an investigation that would have, gotten him caught sooner. Um, but I can see if it was like different religions, different denominations and backgrounds, then I can see that being, he's more easily able to get away with it because they're not all coming from the same church.
maybe. And I was kind of having the same thought at first too. But it's amazing how many times it takes for the church to actually get to that conclusion. Partially because they're so trusting to begin with. Like, you trust authority, you are unassuming on converts or investigators, as they call people that they go visit. And it's crazy how much a person can get away with because they're a member of the church. So
it sounds
it's
like
nuts.
so. So then, does that mean even the leaders wouldn't have noticed or wouldn't have?
Maybe it's, and we don't.
Because at that point, I feel
How long have they been down there? Like, that's the thing. I want a prequel of this thing. Like we did with Sinners. Like, I want to know more about how this got here.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Like, who are those other women? Like the one that
And
they were talking to, like, that tried to actually save them. It's not real. She goes like this.
Mm-hmm.
How long had she been there? Like,
and how many times has he done this?
Yes.
You know, yeah. I had the same questions and everything as well, because I'm like, if he's done this multiple times, because there are several women down there in the cages, so, and he had the two that, or one that died, the body, they moved down to that first room, but like, if he's doing this multiple times, it's like, where, and also my other thing about it is, how is he doing this with these women multiple times? Because when I first watched the movie, I was thinking, okay, so maybe it's, when the missionaries come, he basically kidnaps them, and makes them into the next prophet, because he needs one to die, so another one could be resurrected. But then when I watched it again, I was like, but wait, then why would he kill Barnes and Paxton? Wouldn't he need them to eventually continue? Like, wouldn't he need them to become the future prophets for someone else?
I think he was picking. He was trying to choose who he'd end up keeping. But it was because Barnes was pushing back that he decided not her. Like, he was enjoying it intellectually, emotionally, but like the monster side of him, the ulterior motives, she wasn't a good fit.
Right.
And that's why he brought Paxton all the way down to show her.
Yeah.
Because he thought she'd stay, or he could get her to stay. Whether by force or convincing.
That does make sense, because I was thinking about it, because when I rewatched, Barnes at one point says, I've been trying to figure out all night how he was going to do this, how he was going to get killing us to be our idea. And so, and that's why I thought, okay, so his plan was to kill both of them? And especially because after he kills Barnes, he tries to talk Paxton into, saying like, she didn't come back because she wasn't real, she was a robot, whatever. But you'll come back if you do it. So he was trying to convince her to, take the leap of faith and kill herself. But that's why I'm like, okay, if both of them are dead, how does he get the profits for the next one?
He has extras.
Yeah.
I think I saw like 4 or 5 other women down there.
Yeah. But eventually they're gonna, if every time you do this, one prophet has to die, you're gonna run out of extras eventually, unless you're able to keep one of the missionary hostages.
And I think that scene was kind of cool because, like, he and a lot of us as the audience were underestimating Paxton.
Mm-hmm.
He thought she was the more gullible, the one that he could convince and control and all of that. But she built up a spine. Like, none of us, like, nobody was ready for the magic word to be Barnes's throat and not his. Nobody was ready for that. Like, it still is shocking, even though I know it's coming. So to have Paxton be the final girl, but to have it also work, like, that was cool.
And you can see when that happens, because after Barnes dies, she had to give herself permission to go off script, like did. You hear her say to herself, "Challenge him," right? And she's not dumb. She's smart and she's observant. Like she noticed that the prophet was in a different position when they got back. When Barnes didn't, I didn't notice it either.
Right?
I think most of us probably did not notice or pick up that the prophet had moved. And she picks up on a lot of things around the home as well. When you see her point out, the sign with the bless this mess and all this stuff. So we know she's very observant and she observes her surroundings
and other people. Like, from the beginning, it was, she sees those girls and she's like, immediately loves them. Like, and it's not just the whole like love thy neighbor, it's these girls are so freaking cute, I want to be their best friend. Like,
right,
she is naive and can make really rough judgment calls, but she's genuine about it.
And I think that's the naivety comes in because of the conditioning of the church, right?
Absolutely.
Like you were saying before, they wouldn't have noticed all these missing missionaries because they're so trusting. They trust other people. And so they're, I think, in that the church is quite harmful to like stunt people's ability to like what's the word not be naive. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but
yeah,
not be so trusting.
Susceptible.
Yes, susceptible, but to be aware that not everyone you interact with is gonna have good intentions. Not everyone you meet is gonna be a good person with well intentions. Okay,
there is a reason that Utah is the home for multi-level marketing schemes. It's allowed here legally and culturally. So it's just, if the culture would change, which
but it's that naivety that made the audience think that Paxton wouldn't survive to the end. But then, we do see her change when she finally gives herself permission to go off script and, challenge him, challenge his theories. And we see her start to think critically. And she's like, she's put two and two together and she's like, I don't think it was a near-death experience. Like Barnes said, I think you switched out the bodies. I just haven't figured out how yet. And then you see her start to piece things together and put it together. And I thought that was so amazing. Just showing how strong and what's the word I'm looking for? How much
intelligent too.
Yeah, how much potential she has when she's not allowing herself to be controlled by these sort of rules and restrictions.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like when I was born, it was just after this whole push had happened against three things: homosexuals, intellectuals, and feminists. Those became the three enemies of the church, for reasons I'm only finally starting to understand. And it wasn't a push against education. There's a huge push for education. There's a massive, like, do well in school, get scholarships, be like any kind of topic you want to study it. But you keep blinders on. You do not go into anti-Mormon literature, as it's called. If you see something contrary, you are conditioned to discredit it, just like Paxton does with the whole polygamy thing. She's not stupid. She's just not allowed to really stop and think about that until like something so drastic like this happens. But I think that's also another reason that this movie is a great mirror for this moment, because that was one of the crazy things about the pandemic for a lot of us. It got us out of this constant period of just, you go to church Sunday, you have young men's, young women's on Wednesday, you have your church calling here, you do your visiting teaching on this date, your children have this thing with this other church group, and then you have family home evening on Monday, and it's all focused around the church so much that when the entire world shuts down, you get a chance to stop and breathe, and you get a chance to really start to question what is going on, and you can break away from it. Like, that's why that's happening so much in the last few years.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So Mormonism is just one of those high control groups that it is so much of your life. So it's a drastic example, but yeah, when she gets a chance to just stop and really process and think what is going on, you can see she's not an idiot. And it's so, I love that they actually did that with her, because not only did it break the trope and my expectations of Barnes being the big hero and the final girl, which I still love her, she's still kind of my favorite, but, you know, my mere inner 14, 15-year-old Steph gets to be like, yes, I won. Like, it's so cool to see that too.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, it's there's so much to this movie, and the thing I think that even surprised me with this movie is, at first glance, while it is a great movie and there's, you know, a lot you can discuss, I don't think I realized how much layers there is to this. I don't like, it almost feels like, going back to comparing it to Sinners, it feels, I don't know if I would say as layered, but there may be a lot more layers I'm not picking up on, not being from that background, but it does feel much more layered than I had originally thought when I watched it.
Well, let's see. I got at least this many pages filled, and then some, if you really want to find more layers. So, and like I said, I haven't even touched IMDb. I haven't looked at other ex-Mo or nuance Mormon videos. Like, I've just been having so much fun finding little details.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the little cinema details. Like, I want it. Every time they do a pan of the room, there's definitely something But then when they do the pans in the chapel, like there's absolutely so many little details I want to
Well,
stop and
now I need to.
find.
This is why I say now I need to see it again, because the pan, when they pan the room, that lighting detail that you noticed, I still didn't pick up on it the second time. But interesting, what I did pick up on in my second view was when they're in the chapel. I don't know if you saw this as well, but it looked like one of the prophets was standing in the room, kind of in the corner, covered up. Like there was some figure there that was in all black, covered
Oh,
up, and I thought maybe that was the prophet.
there was a statue, I think of like the Virgin and the child, that was covered. That got lifted. So I don't know. Maybe that was. I don't think he would have let them just stand there, but definitely like the way that the bust was made to look like a man standing in the hallway. Like I said, I got to do a dive on what that was. There's water, the whole thing with the rain and the storm at the beginning, and then when they walk into the chapel, there's a song about rain playing. There's the leak in the ceiling
Mm-hmm.
that just is bugging me because it's dripping into that bamboo thing, which I'm pretty sure has something to do with meditation. But it's also a leak in the roof that he won't fix. So, and then there's all sorts of things disregarding water itself, like baptism and sacrament, and
there's the leak in the basement as well.
Yes, there's another one there too, right under the table.
Yeah, which is how she figured out the hiding,
the trap door, and then the women keep getting sprayed with water, and that's a layer all on its own.
Another symbolic image I saw someone online point out was that bar, that wooden piece that Barnes used
nails
to hit him. Yeah, it had the 3 nails.
Yup. I'm like, that was kind of cool. I wonder if a different one fell, like just a regular, like not dangerous one, and then they threw one that had 3 nails. That would have been. It was a great piece to put in there. I appreciated that.
Yeah. Well, and it ties in with the resurrection. Barnes, resurrection, kind of symbolizing, sort of like Jesus. Whole thing. So, yeah, there's a lot there.
We're about to hit 3, so
there's so much I do need to wrap up soon, but this we could easily talk about for another 3 hours.
There is one last thing I do have to say.
Mm-hmm.
Paxton is wrong. Jack in the Box is best. I have so many issues with why she put it at her lowest on the tier.
Yeah, it was. The choices were Wendy's, Jack in the Box, Taco Bell, right?
Burger King. We don't talk about Taco Bell. Burger King was her top. Wendy's is what she settled on very reluctantly. And Barnes was totally like opposite. She's like, I think Burger King is trash. That was great.
No Popeyes though on the list. I'm like, where's Popeyes or Chipotle?
Right.
Yeah. So this has been such an awesome discussion. So many cool insights. I'm definitely gonna watch it again and keep some of the stuff we talked about in mind when I watch it again.
Yeah, also watch for that, like what the phone says at the end this time.
Yeah, because that along with the other stuff I mentioned is what made me go through the disbelief door that like
Yeah,
she
watching from
died.
like at what point?
She died down there, but just at what point I haven't figured out. But yeah, this was such an interesting conversation, and for anyone watching the replay, if you've seen the movie, let us know your thoughts down below in the chat on anything we discussed or brought up. I would love to know more opinions on this, especially if you're coming from a Mormon or ex-Mormon background. Would love to hear your thoughts about the movie. And yeah, that is pretty much all I have for this time. Um, I I will see you guys next time with another video. And don't forget links for to follow Steph is in the description box below. So and all my links are down there as well. So that's it for this time. I guess I will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.